and communities to learn more about inclusionary practices while providing access to our demonstration sites preschool partners. The open house is an open forum. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat, and this visit will be recorded. As we go through the open house, please keep this etiquette in mind. We encourage a growth mindset where you are open to thinking about new ideas and willing to push yourself to grow. We applaud you for keeping your video on and actively participating today. We love to put names to faces. So thank you for joining us and being present, positive, and engaged. If you need any more information about Hood Canal or the IPP demo sites project, you can use either one of these site links to get more information. There's amazing information there, from tip sheets to webinars and deep dives into Hood Canal's journey. So I encourage you to look into those. We would love to know who is visiting us today. So we would love for you to use the chat and let us know your name, your school or location, and your topic of interest today.
And Mo, do you want to introduce us maybe while people are kind of putting that in there?
Yes, I am Monique Worthy. I am an inclusion specialist at the UW Herring Center. I am also a partner with OSPI, and I enjoy my work. I am very happy to introduce you to Hood Canal. I've had the honor of working with them this crazy year, and I would love for you guys to meet my amazing partner. I couldn't do it without her, Cassie Borges.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cassie Borges, and I'm an inclusion specialist and the lead of this preschool demo site project. We are so excited to have you guys here. This is a fun forum where we just get to talk, so please do make sure that you speak up, either in the chat or out loud, and I'm so looking forward to getting to know you all. I'm going to pass it off to Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Carlson. I'm with Hood Canal Inclusionary Preschool, and I'm so excited to be here and have this really casual but wonderful, deep conversation with everyone today. We are passionate about inclusion here, and we do everything we possibly can to have that equity. So I will pass it to my Special Services Director, Katie Kent.
Thanks. Yep, I'm Katie Kent. I'm the director here at Hood Canal for Special Education and Student Services. And we've just been working really hard this year to not only have our preschool inclusionary practices, but also to have that stretch over our pre-K-8 system. And I've just loved working with Cassie and Monique and Kathy all year.
I absolutely feel the same way. I enjoy working with you all as well.
Trying to look through the chat and see where some people are at. We got Hood Canal people, Skokomish Head Start, Granger School, East Valley, Spokane.
People are wanting to learn more about early learning and special education. Some people are looking to start some inclusion. You have some ECAP directors, some childcare and early start directors. We're happy you're here.
Yes.
This is Kathy's jam, so she is open to all of this. I'm excited that she's able to have this platform because she has amazing things to talk about. So Kathy, why don't we just start by telling them your journey into inclusion? What brought you here? What brought you to this work?
I would love to. First of all, inclusion, it's absolutely incredible to have this experience in my preschool. We were special education only at one point when I came about 7 years ago. And we researched through the Herring Center, and we just stole the wheel and took everything back and applied it to us, not knowing that inclusion could be such a powerful learning experience for all of the kiddos. And it's not just the kiddos who have special needs. It's the kiddos who are typically developing as well, and the empathy that they learn from each other. The one thing that really has been powerful for me is utilizing universal design for learning, because that encompasses inclusion, and we teach to the edges, and we try everything because everyone learns and absorbs information differently. And so through trial and error, from Marzano to GLAD to all the different strategies for SEL, we've been implementing everything we can possibly do. The thing that's important is you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get it right the first time. Don't be frustrated, please. Just keep trying and keep thinking, and definitely have somebody to talk to. You can always talk to me. I'm here 24/7. I will answer the phone, because there were those nights when you don't sleep and you're like, oh, what did I do that for? Ah! And then you go in the next day and you go, okay, it's a new day. You did your best, try again. But everything, every culture, every place and location is different. So everything has to be taken with a unique lens. And so, yeah, my journey isn't even half over yet. I try to hear from everyone and listen, and try to apply anything that they have that could actually improve us, because everybody can be improved. And yeah, so I'm excited to have some conversation about where you want to go and what you're doing right now. That would be really great to hear.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. So in addition to all the amazing work that you've been doing all throughout the year, in general, one of the things in our initial introduction, you and I, Kathy, was your awareness of the historic trauma in the children in your area. And that was really big for me. I would love if you would tell them the same journey and the steps that you took there, because that is huge.
We are a poverty district. We're about approximately 85% low income. We are located on the Skokomish sovereign land, which we recognize with every meeting and everything we do. We're really passionate about building up that relationship. Our attendance was really poor because there was no motivation for anyone to come to school. It was very sad. And through a lot of hard work and a lot of great leadership, we're turning that around finally. But again, we are on a journey ourselves, and every week we check in with each other, and every week we think about what we can do to make that turn around. So with our inclusive preschool, we are free. We try to have equity with everything we do. We do not exclude someone because they can't afford to pay for preschool. And we do a first come, first serve, because again, it's equity. It's whoever signs up. We're not going to pick and choose someone because they might be a friend or they might be this or that. We have a waiting list, as our principal will tell you, and he's on it. So that equity is a really important key factor to think about how you can serve your community with that really solid approach, and showing your intensity to that. Does that help understand that a little bit more about where we are and what we're doing?
Right. I was like, as a reminder to everyone who is in this forum, it is an open forum. You can feel free to call out if you are triggered by something and you want to ask a question for her to go in deeper. Kathy loves that. It's totally fine. But we would love to hear it. This exchange of knowledge is what we're here for. So feel free to make comments. If you feel more comfortable with them being placed in the chat, we can read them for you.
I'll share out.
Thanks, Nikki.
I'm the superintendent at Hood Canal, and this is the close of my second year here, so I'm fairly new. But last year, pre-COVID, we were blessed to have a meeting, a gathering with people from the tribe, in particular elders who had lots of stories, and they shared stories with our staff. And so many of the grandparents who are raising children, or the great grandparents, had been to boarding schools. And the mission of the boarding schools was to take the Native American culture away and replace it with the classic, I guess, white culture. And so kids had their hair cut. They were denied from speaking their traditional language. They were denied of all cultural experiences, and they weren't allowed to go home on breaks. And so a big aha for me, I didn't realize it, was that so many of the people that were raising children here had not been raised by their parents. They had been raised in a cold boarding school setting. And so they didn't see necessarily the role models or have that loving, nurturing experience with their parents. And so there was a lot of mistrust. And there's still mistrust with the school system. And in fact, a lot of our grandparents or great-grandparents would feel very uncomfortable to enter the school, and still do. So really, to overcome all of those barriers with the mistrust, it has to be about us building positive relationships through their children, through the kids, and doing home visits and things like that. So Kathy is a great role model for that. And thank you for presenting, Kathy, on inclusion.
Well, and you know, to piggyback off of what Nikki just said, that cultural awareness piece that we're talking about intensely all over the world right now, we've been aware of that, and we've been thinking of the ways that we can reach that. And it's been my mindset that and I don't call them parents or grandparents, I call them caregivers, because we can't identify one person. We don't know. We have to do that research with each and every individual parent, child, and siblings. And when I say that about the siblings, I just was aware and talking to my director, Katie Kent, and about her childhood, that sibling support for kiddos who have a peer that has a disability, that support has not been there. So I had my aha moment. I am now going to sit down and we're going to figure out how we can create a program for that support. So I'm going to go backwards a bit here and say, so by knowing your family, by knowing their culture, by knowing their pain, you can start to build the trust and the respect for each other. And until you have that, you can't teach. Teaching can't come until you have that relationship with your child. So it's my goal to start here in early learning, building that trust, building that respect, and this community caregivers learning circle that we've created here, they meet and they're safe. I don't go, not anybody in our building goes to these meetings. They're for parents, but I do guide them with different books to help them become better parents so that they can have a discussion around a book, just like a book club that we do for everything that we do in our professional development. They can sit and they can say, man, I almost lost it with my child last night. I just wanted to spank him. We don't need to hear any of that stuff. They get to talk to each other and support each other and to say, gosh, I feel like that sometimes too. So they're building trust with each other. Their children are seeing the parents developing a relationship. They'll come to school more aware and more empathetic with each other as they go through the school system. So my goal is by the time my kiddos get to 8th grade, there will be no more bullying in this building because everybody will have that empathy in place. That's my dream and that's my aspiration for our school. And that's inclusion. It's very powerful.
And I want to just add a little bit on with Kathy. You know, we've been working with our Native population as well as with our special ed population a lot because we've been doing a lot of changes and adjustments throughout the school year with inclusion and bringing our students more into our general education classrooms. And, you know, it comes with obviously hiccups and hills to climb, but And I'm sure there's tons of people on here that can vouch, just the smiles on kids' faces, even through COVID, when they got to come to school and go to class with their peers. Again, there have been challenges and hiccups, but the smiles are worth it. And their parents, you know, I've been really trying hard here in Hood Canal to make contact with every parent and have deep and meaningful conversations about their experience and kind of what they'd like to see happen in our program. And it's hard because you got to put yourself out there, and sometimes it's talking to parents that aren't very happy with the school or happy with a situation that happened, or they have a past trauma with their own school experience. But just by, Kathy does a great job at this too, but just by putting ourselves out there to open up the conversation and say, tell me how you feel, and don't, you know, feel bad about hurting my feelings, or, you know, that's just has been kind of the key to opening up a lot of our relationships with our families. And it's really benefited students. And I can't wait to see as we keep going through our journey.
Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. That relationship piece, and just because the world has just been so crazy as of late, that I feel everything should be approached with just a human aspect. It's just been we've been really distant, and things have been really chaotic, and we've only seen each other's eyes for a year. So it's like, it's crazy. So just, you know, being able to take a step back and just kind of approach the whole person and address that whole person. And on top of your cultural responsiveness to your community, and you know, you being able to take a step back in your own awareness of all of that is amazing, which is what probably led you into wanting to go a little bit deeper with UDL and SEL being more focused on like that community partnership and wanting, you know, your kids to be emotionally sound. So Kathy, would you talk a little bit more about your SEL in your classroom? I love it when you do.
Yes, I'd love to. Our social emotional learning, it's interesting that OSPI is now focusing on that as standards for our schools for all the way through 12th grade. Obviously in early learning, that's the thing we do. We are here to teach our students how to feel, how to express the feelings in a way that is beneficial for the child, but also safe, so that other children are safe around them. And again, I take the universal design for learning approach with social emotional learning, because everyone expresses themselves differently. So in my classroom, they may need the feeling sticks, they may need a feeling buddy, they may need to have a book, they may need to take deep breaths. Some students don't want to take deep breaths because it's a scary thing. Or you have that kiddo who will take 10 deep breaths and do it like this. Okay, I'm done, I'm calm. Well, obviously that didn't work for him. So we have to find a different way that's going to make him soothing and calm. And expressing those feelings and having examples is a very important part. Understanding what grateful means and anxious means, and all of these different feelings that are very complex. And in the world of COVID, it has been a very complex way to express them. My feeling sticks. Val, will you grab them right there for me? So I'm in my classroom, guys. If anybody wants to see anything that's out there, I see some friends that I have talked to over the past years in different ESDs. But so our feeling sticks is another way that we could use them in COVID. Everybody had their tub at home when we did our work, and they would have their feeling sticks. So when they were feeling a certain way, they could take that feeling stick and show it to me, and then we would talk about it. Right now, we're focusing on hangry, because kids do not understand that if they haven't had breakfast that morning, which a lot of our kids don't, they come hungry, that makes them feel intense and angry. So right now we're working on hangry. And it's a lovely word. I don't know who invented it, but I have a wonderful ninja book about it. And so right now that's what we're focusing on, because it's more than hunger, there's anger there. And how do we work on that? And what do we do to make that go away? So different approaches with social emotional learning is more important to have that child ready to go into kindergarten, ready socially, ready to understand, ready to be able to diffuse their feelings in a positive way. because it's just as important as reading and writing. And if they don't have that solid background and that solid support, they aren't going to be able to learn. And that is evidence-based, which it's in the artifacts if you really want to deep dive into it. So that's my job. My job is to make sure that every single one of my students is socially, emotionally ready. And then I will teach them M&M math, and I will teach them different cognitive pre-literacy, everything else that they'll have to go with their kindergarten. But social emotional learning, if I can say anything about anything, that's the powerful thing for preschool, and inclusionary preschool. It's just even more exceptional. So lots of tools out there. And I think that will be available for anybody who wants to look at that webinar that I did for just social emotional learning. It's a good hour of lots of information and supports for family, supports for parents, because if your parents aren't understanding what you're doing in the classroom, then they can't be powerful at home. So that's another part that we really need to know what's going on in the home and how they're feeling, and are they getting that support at home? Anybody got any ideas or questions?
Even though Kathy's given us a lot of information, I would love, just based off of the comments in the beginning about the topics of interest here, what are some barriers that you are facing on your way to being more inclusive? What is something that you want to see happen in your program that you're not seeing that brought you here?
My huge barrier is space. That's my huge barrier. When I have a waiting list of 10 to 12 little kiddos who just want to be in preschool and I have no place to teach them, it really breaks my heart. As my peers here know how passionate I am about that. And we are working hard at trying to figure that out. Superintendent Nikki and Principal Bruni are working hard on figuring out how we can improve our structure, where we can go, how can we finance it. But that is their number one goal for us. So we know that it's important to get that, and we know it's important to try to solve that problem as soon as possible. That's one of the big barriers. Another big barrier for me personally is I need more education and more professional development for my English language learners. I do use GLAD strategies, which is a huge, huge tool, but I'm working on becoming a GLAD trainer, but that's all because of COVID. But that's one of my areas where I really have a lot of need for growth. And my partners over in Eastern Washington, I really want to be able to have some PDs with them, because there's some really good schools over there that are teaching a lot of English language learners and have some really great ideas. But so those are my barriers right now.
Thank you. Feel free to share, anyone. But if not.
Love awkward silence.
That's okay. I was going to ask, I saw that we had someone from Eastern Washington, East Valley, Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of a culture what kind of a dynamic is going on over there? I'd like to hear about that, because I know you must have a lot of English language learners because of the agriculture around you.
Oh, be nice.
Louise.
Well, surprisingly, our English language learners are not necessarily Spanish, which is what you would think because of the agriculture, but we're not, the agriculture around here isn't necessarily labor specific. It's more grain fields and hay and that kind of thing that are done by individual farmers with big equipment. So, but we have Russian and Marshall. We've had quite an influx of Marshallese. And we have quite a bit of Russian. Trying to think, Louise, can you think of any more?
Marshallese is the big one that I've got. We've got some kiddos that are Hispanic, but they are native English speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Marshallese, that's our English language learners.
And then we have some Arabic as well. So very different than what you would probably see in Hood Canal or in some of the southern parts of Washington.
Oh, very surprising, yes. And there's a question, how do you infuse inclusion into a classroom routine? You have to do, again, teach to the edges. I have visual schedules. I teach my very weak Spanish, but I still do it. And I make sure that the kids know that I'm learning with them. And I use assistive technology, both for my English language learners and as well for kiddos who need a visual schedule. So I have the visuals and I have the sign and I have the GLAD strategies, but I use all of those to make sure that everybody is included into their program and into the routine. There's a class routine that's visual, also with words, Spanish and English. My classroom is labeled Spanish and English, and every day we practice about 15 minutes of just learning words in English, Spanish, and sign. And I do it simultaneously. So, and it's a lot of fun. It's with music, so the kids enjoy it. The funny thing is that we're doing a lot of the "Do you like broccoli ice cream" song, and we do it in English and Spanish, and then I sign it. Now the joke is that they know how to say "si me gusta" and "no me gusta," and so they pretend that they don't like something or like something even though they do. So it's a very engaging time for everyone in the classroom, and that's part of it. Inclusion needs to be engaging for all.
Kathy, I have a question that says, how do your students use their Chromebooks and their smartboard and the smartboard?
We have not been using Chromebooks this year. We do have them. They all have one. But because of COVID, I'm not pushing that technology right now. The smartboard is used as a support. They can't use it the way we usually do because we have a lot of engaging team games that we play on it that teaches a lot of strategies and embeds a lot of colors and math and everything. That would be a typical school year. Right now, our smartboard is utilized for support with music, support with translation, and visuals for whatever lesson I'm going to be learning at that time. I also utilize, I don't know if you've heard of Brooks Brothers Story Friends. It's a technology that is an audio book that comes with the visual books. And it actually cues the student how to go through a book that may never have had a book before. And it also has lots of engaging little flaps and things. And there's a wand of the word wolf, so they learn cognitive as well as rhyming, as well as sight words. So that's another technology that I use. Then I will put that on the smartboard. So they have the big, and then they have the book. So there's kind of concrete.
She forgets everything she does. Kathy, how did you engage your students that were still in remote learning with your students that were there in person?
I am in math.
Using the smartboard though,
Yeah,
right?
right.
They were at home on their Chromebooks and they were able to actually like be part of the class every single day. The remote students were on the board and the kids were talking to each other, whether they were on the computer or at home or in the classroom.
And so we had some remotes when we came back. And so they got to actually go through everything that we were doing for large motor skill. And they were on the big smartboard. So they looked like they were life size. It was really quite fun. But so the smartboard has been a really good tool in a lot of ways in the COVID, but it even has more power when we have a typical time going on in our classroom.
Thank you. So, excuse me. So Kathy, what I think about that gets so scary about starting being inclusive in a program is just thinking that it's going to be very difficult. So of course you're really motivated behind it. Katie's really motivated behind it, but what were the steps that you took to get buy-in from the community, from the district, from administrators? Like what steps did you take to get there from each level, from your stakeholders?
We had an echo. We started with research. We observed other inclusionary programs that were being done in a way that was with fidelity and something that we would want to put our name on. So I did observations at the time. It was, I went around with my ESD 113 representative, Ryan Guzman, who is very into early learning. And so we observed the Herring Center. We observed, we also went to some in Olympia that said they were inclusionary, but weren't. That was an interesting thing too, because then all of a sudden you have this comparative. So I think it's really good to see, oh, and this was really something that was very helpful for me when she took me through, and all of us have great ESD people, I know that for a fact. She wouldn't tell me if it was going to be a great experience or if it was going to be an experience that I would be like, oh, really? She made me observe, write my notes, and then we would sit down and say, okay, what was inclusionary about that? What wasn't inclusionary about that? What would you take away from that? What wouldn't you take away from that? So observing other programs, good and bad, really help you solidify what you want to do in your mind for an inclusionary program. And there's a lot of things that may work for you, but weren't what I saw as something that I felt would be labeled as inclusionary. So that's how I started. I started by observation. Then I started by researching, and I spent a week at the Herring Center just learning from their experts. And then I took all that information, and my director and I sat down and we wrote up an entire plan, how to start. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We didn't just come right back and go, okay, we're going to do this. We started by how do we start? What do we need to start? And then we had all of the possible answers that we would get from the school board and our community and have them already anticipate what those questions would be. So we would have answers before the questions were presented to us. And then we did present it and the timeline that we wanted to start. And it took a year to 2 years. It doesn't just start and then you're there. And then I wasn't really the best inclusionary school that first year. Every time I went to another PD or another webinar or something, I'd pull something out of it and think, okay, that would make me even a more efficient inclusionary program. It's baby steps, just like what about Bob? Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. And that's the important part, to keep your heart humble and to have those baby steps. And that is really so important. And so after we presented and we had a good plan, we started our first year, and ever since the beginning of it, we just keep growing and building, and it's been quite a journey. It's been amazing.
I would add to Kathy, she's so humble. She has such a humble heart. She has like a broad plan of what she wants it to look like long term, but she's always adding and changing. You know, she'll find something, add it in, get proficient at it, and then add something else and get proficient at it and add something else. Like she's always learning new strategies, new skills, and adding all throughout her year, which I think is key to, because it is hard to get started and it is hard to get everybody on board, but every single person, every staff member can change one thing that they're doing every, month to 6 weeks to just get that inch closer and closer and closer to that vision. And what I've seen happening here at Hood Canal is, as we're implementing different things, people are seeing the benefits. There's little examples of how inclusion has benefited the whole classroom, or how an assignment has been modified, but the student got to stay in the room for it. And just seeing those and celebrating those is really, really helpful. So it can just start in one place with one staff member and just take baby steps until you can get more people on board.
Well, and the other part about that is we are completely inclusion. Our kiddos, with the exception of a specialized maybe 15 minutes at the most, the kids never leave the room. They never leave each other. They're learning from each other. And that empathy part, that is so, oh my gosh, there's just way too many stories to tell you about how I have seen kiddos who came in a little afraid or fearful of this kid who has this disability or whatever. And then they learn that, oh, he's kind of funny. One of my little kiddos who was nonverbal couldn't say anything. His first words were, he came in, he had cowboy boots on, and he said, Yahoo! I mean, these things are just, you just can't make all of the wonderful things that these kids do up. It's unbelievable how fun it is. Unbelievable. I come to school every day just this happy every day. takes a lot to put me down, but yeah, it is baby steps. I don't know where you are in your journeys for those who are here today, but it's patience, and it's just perseverance, and just knowing that you're doing the right thing for all of the community and all the kids. That's really an important thing to remember.
There's a comment in there for you, Kathy, that says, and Katie, that I agree. Kathy has worked hard and is getting this going and is doing a great job. No wonder there's a long waiting list.
Oh,
I'll say Kathy makes such great relationships with her family and her parents through the different programs and how she works with parents and the resources that she gives them, that they're still talking about Kathy like years later. And the kids are still talking about Miss Kathy years later. And so, you know, it's very evident the impact that Kathy makes in the classroom. One thing I was going to say, I've just been thinking about it based on some of the people that are here. My recommendation for directors of programs or people that are in charge of their programs is to, like Kathy was saying, really get a handle on the research that's out there right now. I mean, one thing when we're talking with our staff members that has been helpful is just laying out, like Washington State is 44th in the country for inclusionary practices, and we're working to change that, and we can't keep doing the same thing we've been doing. And so by using that research and that information, it's empowered us to say, we have to move, like we can't stay stagnant in what we've been doing. So that would be my recommendation to directors, is just use the data, use the evidence to support why a change has to happen. And then once the change happens, use the data to support why you need to keep going.
well, and then, you know, there's another part about that. When you're having an inclusionary program and you want to be an inclusionary school, you need to have the same things in place for each grade level, the same, and that's where universal design for learning comes in. And we are targeting our whole school to become GLAD. So each grade level will have the same feeling in the classroom once we're all trained in GLAD, because they've had done the chanting the year before. They do the chanting. Chanting is nothing new for a preschool teacher. That's all we do for memorization. And so, but if you take that to the grade, the GLAD strategies all the way through, then you're going to have that student coming in not going, oh, what's going on in this classroom this year? This is all weird and new and different. But if they see that GLAD, they're like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. So it gives them, it builds your students' confidence. It builds the teachers' continuity with each other. And you can have those conversations between grade bands. And that makes it a powerful learning school. It's a really, and that's where we're going. And we're just, like I said, we're just baby stepping our way. We're just starting our big push. So, and again, COVID kind of got in our way for a lot of that, but we're going to get back on track.
Let's see here. Say kids love to learn with each other naturally. I have a student that is nonverbal and has a hard time expressing himself when he's upset, and he thrives with his classmates. I can only imagine the success without COVID separation protocols. The students in class have learned wonderful skills like sign language, teamwork, supporting social, emotional, not complex, when done with little steps. Teachers want to support their kids, just supports and ideas to start it with.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so speaking on UDL, when you think about in your classroom, since you're back in class, right, Kathy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are some materials that you use in your UDL?
Oh my gosh, I do have enough time. My UDL program has taken, as we talked about many times, and I hate to be redundant, but teaching to the edges, not teaching to the average. You teach to the edges, meaning the high and the one that's struggling. And visuals are very important. Assistive technology is very important. Music, maybe not music. Every single child will find something that is the thing that makes them work. And by combining and embedding all of the different strategies, that embedding will actually pull all of the kids in for whatever their needs are at the time. I also utilize, part of my UDL is, we've had a lot of trainings here at Hood Canal School, from PACS to Marzano to CHAMPS, lots of stuff. And I actually still use a lot of every single one of those things to be able to have a good solid UDL. For example, Marzano, one of the most famous things I think that I ever heard was Marzano teaching about teach the big picture, then get it and dissect it. So for example, instead of going and starting your little unit on life at the farm or whatever you're going to do, the zoo, and you talk about animals, first you go to the zoo or first you go to the farm. And then you have your children not only learning, but they can pull from all 5 senses, their sight, their nose, their mouth, their ears, everything that they've smelled and touched. So now when you come back and talk about that, they will remember all of the things that they just experienced. So that's one of the strategies I use with my UDL. It covers everything and it reaches every child. Maybe the child can't hear, but the child can see. It really is one of those powerful things. Using the GLAD strategies is another really powerful UDL. GLAD can be used very precise, or you can take it and make it work for the little early learning kiddos. And that again is another concrete thing that you can do with just tangibles. Another thing that I love is my M&M math, and who doesn't like an M&M? Well, some kids don't, but 95% out of 100 do love their M&Ms. And you're teaching concrete, and you're teaching abstract, and you're teaching representative of those numbers. And they're touching something, they're feeling something, they're seeing something, and they're learning their fine motor skills, and it develops their discipline for using their journals. It just ties in so many different things, again, embedding all of that. Of course, I use my smart boards. In a typical school year, they would get to use their Chromebooks, probably 15 minutes to support whatever lesson. I utilize Quills, which is another assessment that we have. So there's all of those things that tie in, but a lot of visual, a lot of concrete, and a lot of thinking about what that child is feeling and needing, because they all do process it differently.
Awesome. Kathy, you got a question that says, what advice do you have for staff that is going into inclusion style classroom to break the yours and mine to make it our students?
Oh man, that is that's not an uncommon question.
It's not.
That is something that everyone, I don't know that I've ever not been to a school that hasn't had that kind of a situation. And first of all, you do have to have all the teachers who are in that situation, they have to have buy-in. They have to be willing to put themselves into a place where, say, let's sit down and talk about this child. Let's sit down and talk about what this child needs. Let's sit down and talk about what your styles are. A lot of strategies that you can use are just really coming alongside each other and sitting down and making that plan together, that collaboration, and not coming in and pushing in and playing the expert. None of us are experts. We make a great expert together. And it's important to have that trust with your person that you're working with that collaboration. And you're not going to get along all the time, but you can respect what each other is saying, and you can respect that you're feeling that way. And that's an important thing that I think we all can take away, is that when somebody's telling you something, try to understand that the barrier may just be because of something they're feeling internally. And so I do have to say, one of the things that I do is I don't take anything personally from anybody. I just go, oh, well, that's it. And if we all do that and we teach together, that collaboration can happen. And I don't know how it's working for you, Tina, but if you're having meetings about a student, everyone should be involved in those meetings. And that's what we do here. Our general ed teacher, our special ed teacher, maybe a possible speech situation may not even be identified yet, but anything that's on the radar, anyone who could help with that situation should be involved in creating that for that little kiddo. And that includes bus drivers. That includes the kitchen staff. They need to know what this kiddo is needing and what this kiddo is afraid of, or what this kiddo might have challenging them that day. Perfect example, I had a little kiddo who every once in a while would come in and just be so aggressively violent and physical. And I couldn't understand why. Well, I talked to my bus driver, and it turns out he wasn't sitting in the seat he always wanted to sit in because of random happenings. So when we gave him the seat he wanted, guess what? Every day was a great day. But he couldn't communicate that to me. So he acted out. There's a rational reason for what they're doing. So I'm kind of I'm sorry, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but in order to have that child be our child, then the conversation starts way before the child even comes into the classroom. And it's with you at that collaboration meeting, and have that respect.
All right, focusing on the whole child. That was great. That's focusing on the whole child, and then at the same time, you're focusing on everyone who's gonna influence and touch that child. Like, they're gonna be the ones that are in there, and including bus drivers. That is a big thing at the EEU. We have a whole week celebrating our bus drivers because they have to go through a lot just to get to our building in the mornings. And then, it's a lot. We have kids that need to be picked up with the wheelchair ramp. There's a lot of traffic at that time. Some kids may be more challenging than others. Like, everyone involved with our students are celebrated. And it's one of those things where you have to practice what you preach when you speak upon inclusion. You have to model it if we want the students and the staff to be inclusive and the families to be a part of it. We have to model that. That's awesome. Thank you.
I have a little bit to add, Monique. So it isn't just at preschool, but what I've seen happening and working is teachers are doing a really good job of, students tend to look to the teacher to ask them questions about another student, like if they're struggling. And we have a lot of great teachers who are actually having the students turn back and say, ask them, ask them how you can help, or try to do this. And so that helps with, the kids in the classroom. And then as far as staffing, one thing that's really, I feel like, I don't know if everyone will agree, but I feel like it's working for us with our paraprofessional staff. We're actually not having it separated by special ed staff and general ed staff. Our staff is all doing a portion of supervision, special ed, general ed, because the students are included for a big portion of their day. And so that's kind of making the lines more blurred as far as yours and mine. And I think teachers that are collaborating real well with their special ed teachers and their staff that are in the classroom. I've also seen the teachers stepping up to take the group that's struggling because they're the expert in their content, and having the rest of the class go with the other staff member. And I see Kathy do that a lot in preschool. Val is amazing, her support staff in there, and she can say, hey, Val, you take them, and Kathy can take a student or two aside and work with them in a small group. And that also helps, so any adult in the room is seen as a teacher. And like Monique was saying, it's all about your language that you're using with each other and how you're treating each other, and kind of how you view inclusion. And sometimes that involves us tweaking our language a little bit.
Yeah, it's very true. And that, and a lot of things that I feel that work really well with myself and Val, we do a lot of role playing with situations and things that maybe that we may be seeing, that maybe we need to help work through. But by doing that with each other, then when the situation comes into the classroom, we're on it. We're to the point, because we've been working together, that I can just do this with my head or that, and then she knows that this is that, and it's a smooth transition so that there's nothing that's going to upset the other kiddos, but we can handle the situation in a way that's powerful. Another part of our school, our lunch team, they see our kids during typical, well, now they're seeing them anyway because we're handing out food, but when they're coming through the lunch line, for example, all the different things that they see coming through. Their information is important to us because we don't see that. And we don't know that there's something that maybe we could be doing to prevent situations that happen and make it a easier, smooth time for those kiddos going through. I really like to hear her say to me, Lois is her name. She says, every beginning of every fall, every school year, she says, I can tell which kids were in your class and which ones weren't. That was the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. It was like, oh, I'm doing my job. But yeah, you're right, Katera, you're owning, well, I'm not preaching, am I? I don't like to preach, but it's just my passion.
No, we love to hear about it. I can listen to you talk all day, Kathy.
Yeah, I do want to share something with anybody who hasn't heard about this PAX. This has been a very powerful tool that I've used since I learned about it. And this is a little harmonica. And instead of doing the count, well, I do timers, of course, but I use my harmonica to get everyone's attention, and I have the visual to go with it. But just this, every single one of my students will stop and do this. And they love the game. It's a fun game. You're not talking over them. You're not doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There are kids who need that 5-minute warning. So I do a 5-minute warning for everybody. Okay, 5 minutes, I'm turning the timer. So you got your visual and you got your sounds, but you're not yelling over children. And this even worked on Zooms when all the kids are trying to talk in the boxes and you're like, no, stop. I just put the harmonica and went. But so this is a really fun tool you guys might want to try if you're teachers out there, or take it back to your teachers.
Kathy, what about just because with all those new changes and like being in the building, adding these practices and probably needing resources and tools and things like that, how did you generate funding for your project, especially because you have a free program, so you have a lot of tools and necessity. Yeah. So how did you get funding? What was your method? What were some barriers in between that as well?
That is something that would be our financial guru could answer better than I can, but I can give you a broad stroke picture of how we are funded. And because we started special ed, we already had that funding. And our director, who was here at the time, is Devin and Jeannie Beebe. They got together and they figured out, and I have a whole thing on that, and I can send that to anybody who's interested, or to Cassie, how this looks as far as getting that funding. The funding is 100% special education. We maintain a 60-40% in our classroom. That's 60% kiddos with special needs and 40% kiddos who are typically developing. And we cannot provide transportation for those kiddos who are typical unless they're on the route. And it's just amazing. They're always on one of the routes. So we can provide free transportation. We can provide food. We can provide their school. And it's all, like I said, it's all under the special ed fundings. So it can be done. And I can give you more details on that one. Yeah, think outside the box.
Did you have some major barriers in kind of utilizing where to put your funding once you received it? Like, did you need some more support in this area versus this area when it came to supports and resources?
No. I have not had any. I have not had any barriers once we got the program up and going as far as financial support. And now that I'm with the inclusionary champions, I get financial support from them as well. And if you are going inclusion, they are taking your ESD, check it out and see what they've got going as far as funding. There's lots of grants that are not being used to start up inclusionary programs. And so that money is out there. So we're in our 3rd year getting money from ESD 113 for our inclusionary program. And that's just in addition to. So, But I've been using my inclusionary monies to pass on to the kinders because they're really focusing on becoming inclusionary, and now so is the first grade. So we're working our way into our building to make it a real solid program. So I give my money to anybody who needs it in the building.
And Kathy, can you mention that one more time, and I'll put it in our artifacts for resources?
For the funding?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our funding is 100% special education, and it's under the umbrella of a guideline of 60-40, 60% kiddos who are special needs and 40%. I've seen a lot of inclusionary programs that do 10% kiddos with special needs, like ECAP, Head Start. That's all they're required. I just don't feel that's good practice. So that's why when we were putting this together, that's how we decided the best way. And of course, we stole that from the Herring Center. So just saying.
And where would people go to their ESD to find more information? Just to their ESD representative, or?
I would go to their special ed department and start there. And then I would have the special ed department talk with their financial person and have that conversation. And I can give more detail. I have a few little papers that I have written on that I can send and put it in the archives. And that way they can just check it out and pull it up.
Most ESDs right now, because there has been funding, most of them have an ESD inclusionary specialist. So you can look on the website and see if your ESD has one of those or not. And then they can let you know some of the ESDs, and there's also state programs through the ESDs to get funding as well for inclusionary practices.
Thank you, Katie. What about Head Start versus grants? How does that pan out?
Well, that's a good question. Head Start has, we have a Head Start that's right next to us. Kuhn, you might want to address that. We have Kuhn from, or Quinn, sorry. I see that K and I always did phonetic. But Quinn works at our Head Start. She's our interim director over there. Would you like to address your funding or not? You don't have to, don't worry.
Right now, I do not know. I don't have any further information. But for our funding, Head Start is fully supported by the federal, the Office of Head Start, and childcare is coming out from another funding. So, yep.
And you have to have a minimum of 10% kiddos with special needs? Is that
yes,
correct?
it is required, and so we are working on it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's different. Woo. Sorry, it just froze a little bit.
Can I just add, Monique, with the question about ECAP and Head Start?
Yes.
One of the things that Kathy and I have talked about, and it was in place before I was here, but one of the big reasons was a lot of times the spots for ECAP and Head Start are tied to socioeconomic status or some other factors. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but there's kind of like a point system. And so some students that wanted to get into preschool couldn't get into preschool. And so we kind of went with a different model of that. And we do kind of, if they do have special needs, they do have a different way we look at them on the waiting list. But other than that, we're kind of looking at like first come, first serve, and there's an application process and you're on the waiting list. If all the spots are filled, we're not gathering all the applications first and then looking at the numbers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And to answer your question, how many students do you have total in your program? Can we assume that all preschool students with IEPs are included in the preschool if they qualify for more than just yes and yes and yes? Everyone is included. Our program is an AM and PM, and is this plugged in? No, because I need that plugged in. Sorry about that. My battery is getting a little low. So we have an AM and PM, and we have 10 and 10. And with square footage, I maintain 9 because, oh, my battery.
I'll keep talking for her.
Sorry.
So in her classroom with COVID restrictions and how far we have to keep kids apart, she actually moved her desk out of her classroom and her space out of her classroom so that she could fit another kid. So right now she can have up to 9 in the room with COVID.
With COVID. Well, I don't know if you can see the hula hoops. Da-da-da. Anyway, all the kids have a hula hoop around the circle, and in that is their name. So they have to do name identification when they come in and find their name and their picture. But so what I do is equity. We talked about that much in the future and in the past of our program. And even though in a regular school year, I can have 10 kiddos in each AM and PM, I always maintain 1 full and 1 with only 9. Because if I have a kiddo coming in from out of district who is on an IEP, they have priority. But is that fair to that kiddo who's typically developing to have to leave because of that? No, that's not equity for me. So I keep 1 space in one of my programs to make sure that that child coming in, entering, especially like it happens a lot around right after Christmas. I make sure that that kid is in my school, but I'm not making anybody suffer and have to leave the school. So that's kind of what I do. And it's not a numbers game about how many, it's about the quality of the program for us. That's important.
Well, I was just wondering how you manage those numbers though, because if they have an IEP, you have to serve them.
We do.
Yeah, okay. So there's nobody dropping off because of, okay, very good.
Everybody is served.
Good, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're also making a shift in kind of like our child find. Kathy and I were just talking about this, where we're actually going to try and reach out not only within our school community of kids we know that are coming up that have filled out applications, but also with our Head Start, so that we're catching those students at the end of August or the very beginning of September. And so we are able to catch some of the students and get them into the program before we fill a lot of those spots. So that's going to be our plan moving forward.
Yeah, well, and then with COVID, I don't know, I'd like to hear if anybody else has had this situation in their regions, but we have had a real difficult time with our parent-to-parent program who services our birth to 3. And so we are not seeing a lot of kiddos in the program for birth to 3 services, which makes us nervous because we know they're there somewhere. But I don't know how that, I think it was 3 years ago, maybe 4, when we stopped doing the birth to 3 here at Hood Canal, and we now contract it out. A lot of different districts did that because of the whole financial change with that situation. But so we
and it just changed again this year, and so we don't always even know if a kid's coming to us until they're coming to us. So that's been a difficult change over this year.
Yeah. So how is that working for, I don't know, does anybody want to speak to that in your regions for your birth to 3?
Feel free to leave it in the chat if you don't want to speak it out.
Yeah.
I will be able to see it later. Cassie, let's see. Yeah, we're a good time. Kathy, I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you address race and equity in your classroom.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. We have we call it a celebration. We celebrate our differences. We celebrate diversity, and we celebrate it by pointing it out to each other. Oh, you have brown hair. Oh, wow, isn't that cool? Oh, you have this, or you have that. Oh, wow, listen to this little kiddo can speak like this. That is awesome. I want to learn how to do that. So we spend time every day celebrating how everyone is, how they look and how they feel, what they eat, what they like. And we have a gratitude box that we just started. So we're teaching about gratitude for each other and what we're doing. And that equity is across everything we do in here. And everything can be put into perspective for them because they know that they are so special. and that they have everything to offer and that everything they do is unique. And that's how we make them feel every day. We want them to know that they are the most unique, most wonderful person, and really building up that self-esteem. So we don't, oh gosh, already. Bye, somebody's leaving, gracia, has to go. Anyway, so we celebrate those differences. We point them out because we are not all the same. We are all different. And that is a great celebration for all of us to enjoy that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have like an activity example that you do that is like, how can I put it, where you use that celebration aspect when you talk about race and equity, other than, yeah, what you just described?
Okay, every day at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, we think of, they have to come to us and they get to be in charge, and they tell us something that's special that happened to them. We also ask the parents to give us any kind of information that they, my parents are very, I've built a good relationship with all of them, and they are very open to sharing things that are going on in the home, or things that they want to eat or what they want to do. And we take whatever that is and bring it into the classroom and make that part of our day. And then at the end of the day, we do the same thing, and everybody gets the same applause. Everybody gets that same attention, and everybody gets that hardworking, good job.
It's the cutest thing in the world. I got to see them yesterday, and there were like 3 of the kids that were like, I just loved playing with all of my friends. And they all were like, and it was just too cute.
Yeah, they really are. It's a fun time. But by teaching them the mindset of acceptance, the differences are celebrated. The differences are just part of who they are. And I think that's really important for all of us to do for each other, is to celebrate our differences. Even, you know, and I think that I have to say, Hood Canal staff, this is like the most fabulous group of people that we have had. I've had the honor to be around, and we are so accepting of everybody's differences. And by us doing that and showing that empathy to each other, the children are seeing that. And that's another important learning lesson. You can tell a child what to do, but if you're not showing them and if you're not walking the walk, they know right through you and they see right through you. So that is a very important part, to be that accepting, to be able to say, oh, wow, look at that wild blonde hair you've got. I wish I had blonde hair. Or wow, I can't get my hair to do that. We talk about our physical differences all the time in that kind of a manner. And that makes them be appreciative, and it shows them that we're appreciative. And it's a powerful learning. It's so organic. It's not forced or staged. It's really sincerely organic with each and every one of the kiddos. Oh, Val's got our, this is my gratitude box. So this is hilarious. They come in and they tell me something they're grateful for. And then at the end of the week, I pull out what they said they were grateful for, and they don't remember. They forget who said what, and that's all good. But it's all about that whole process, that they're listening to each other and respecting their talking time. So that's a really important thing.
That's awesome. So, with all great things must come to an end.
Oh gosh, that was fast.
No, not you, but not as of now. But when we think about you leaving, but don't answer that question just yet. But when we think about sustainability of all these amazing practices and everything that you do in your program, what does that look like when we're thinking about the preschool transition to kindergarten? Like, how do you maintain that sustainability of those practices into their transition to kindergarten?
You know what? Superintendent Nikki Grubbs asked me that a couple years ago. She said, yes, you have a great program, but how are we going to sustain that if you leave? And the really important thing to do is, I want to be a part of the process when we do have that transition situation. And part of that process, and I haven't spoke to Nikki about this at all, but or Principal Vernon, I want to be able to be a part of the actual transition and the training and the smooth thought process of everything that we're doing. But then showing all of that and being a part of that, and I'm thinking at least a couple of weeks, I want to do that. But then the last thing I want to say to whoever that person is make it your own. It's got to be your own. Here's everything that I've done, everything that we're doing, but now take your personality and make it your own and make it even more better and more powerful. And the transition to kindergarten, we spend a lot of time with my kindergarten teachers and I look and see what they're doing so that it's not unfamiliar to the kids when they are going into kindergarten. We do a lot of the same signals and signs. I spend a lot of time, well, we can't right now, but I used to take a field trip every week with my students to the different areas of the school, and in particular down the kindergarten, so there wasn't an unfamiliar situation for them when they do come back to school. So that's in the future when we get to do that again. But we do work with the kindergarten teachers in that transition and keep it an ongoing communication with each other. And that's part of that whole UDL. If you're doing everything in a UDL mindset and strategy, then you are having that transition and it'll be smooth from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. And in our school, pre-K all the way up to 8th grade. So that's where it really is powerful, that UDL.
Amazing. So when we're thinking about the continuation of this work, because we talk about this often, Kathy, Cassie, and Katie, all these cuz. I have so many cuz around me. It's amazing. Except for me, I'm the odd man out. I got the M, but it's okay. What are your next steps, Kathy and Katie? I would love to know what your next goals are for, like, what are maybe you want to pull in some new inclusionary practices. Maybe you want to try to, expand your play area outside. That's been going on too, and a lot of our partners. Like, what are your goals and your plans for Hood Canal moving forward?
Well, I'm just inserting myself on certain teams, like the facilities team, and, just really picking certain ones so I can be like, hey, don't forget about this. Because we definitely are trying to create an inclusive playground, not only for preschool, but for our whole school. And so, it's going to be a long process to get it exactly where we want it, but just starting with the team that might be able to make it happen the quickest. And then also just researching a lot, like what grants and things that we can get or community support that we can get. And then, like Kathy was saying before, we're really trying to come up, and I already did kind of talk with Nikki and Vernon about this a little bit, like trying to come up with more ways where our staff can be more fluid with each other and, be able to visit each other's classrooms and model with their students, with the other teachers' students, like what it could look like as we're moving up those grades, so that we're not having a disconnect between inclusionary preschool and then after. That's really our focus right now. And so Kathy's already started that work, especially with our K2 team of making sure our special education teacher who's in that level doing case management is getting the same resources that she's getting. And the kinder teachers are getting the same resources that she's getting. And so that's been really helpful. And then for me, I've also just been using the opportunity of COVID and the silver lining that I'm choosing to call it, where it's really hard to have kids across our building crossing groups. And so we have them based on their hallway, and the staff that works with them is in that hallway. And that's really been beneficial for me and Kathy and our vision of inclusion, because it was the perfect opportunity to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and say all kids are going to be included in 3 hours every day of class, no matter what. And we've just been kind of tearing down those barriers for those kids and those hallways, just so that, we can figure out how it goes this year and look at it and look at the data this summer and just figure out what else we need to do to help support that process and keep it going.
Yeah. And there's two things that I'm researching, besides the fact that I want to be a much more proficient EL teacher. educator. I also am wanting to, and I've talked with Katie about this, we want to have a sibling shop. It's called Sib Shop. I went to a webinar last week, and it's another component to become really an inclusionary program. And the Sib Shop is about, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, it's an actual, like my community caregivers learning circle. The siblings, the parents of the siblings get together and they support that sibling that is having, that it may be typically developing. It's a really powerful group for them, because one of the things that Katie she can tell you a testimony that you would not believe, her life, that lack of support, it was one of those aha moments. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not supporting all of my kiddos with special needs and the siblings that come in. I'm friendly and I love them and I talk to them, but am I meeting their needs? Because they can be needy, they can be overachievers. There's all different ways that a sibling that's typically developing in a family with that child with a disability is coping. They need those coping skills and that support. So that's one program I'm going to create with Katie. And the other thing that I really want to do, and Katie and I've talked about it and we haven't presented it yet, but we have to work out the timeline, is to, I heard from one of our, and this is why this collaboration and demo sites is so incredible, because I heard from another school district where they, I believe it's Wenatchee, Cassie, that they have a grant where they're taking high school students who are getting credit to teach in the early learning programs, and they're being supervised by graduate students from the University of Washington. And it's such a win-win, because kids learn better and more powerfully with a kid their own age or a younger person than us old people. And you're getting funding, and you're helping high school students with some really serious skills about becoming adults and becoming that wonderful parent or uncle or aunt or whatever. So that's another thing that I want to research and see what we can do about it here at Hood Canal and utilize Shelton High School. So those are the two things that I really want to focus on for the next year coming up, as well as continuing our cultural awareness and responsive teaching for our school. That's another thing too that we're focusing on here. We're focusing on a lot.
And I can put a link to the deep dive webinar that school, that's Kodiak Cuts Preschool, that they talk about that whole project and how they developed the CTE program. We also did an open house this week, so should be available sometime on our website moving forward that answers even more questions about that. But it's a great program, and Kathy, we can definitely put you in touch with Lindsay, because she would be happy to talk with you about that.
Yeah, I will be the information gatherer for our team and then come back and beg.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love that program. It's Lindsay calls it the big kids, and now with our college students, they're the bigger kids, and so I guess that makes me and Cassie the bigger kids. But it's once again, it's that practice what you preach kind of mindset. Like, we have a growth modeling mindset. Like we're open to trying new things, because we know that we need new things. Just like Katie said, being 44 in the US and inclusion, like that should not be our numbers at all. And Katie said we're the biggest kids. Agreed. Hence the cartoons all over my wall. But it is amazing to be able to model that, and that's huge. It's like starting from the seed up into the plant, and I feel really just honored to work with all the preschool teams, because you guys put in so much hard work and so many efforts, and I hope we can continue this work forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, me too.
I would like to open the floor for anyone to have any last minute questions or comments to Kathy or Katie or Cassie or myself. Feel free.
You want to get noodles? I have one more thing to share. Our therapy dog. This is Noodles. She's warm and cuddly and doesn't lick, but she does bark a few times here and there. She's been with us through the whole program. Oh, there's my friend Lois Wagner. I was bragging about you, Lois.
I also have to say I see Dan Winter on here. Dan Winter is our PE teacher, and we've already been like just on the side of the building chatting about like, hey, how can we have some modified PE that's still general PE? And he has some really great ideas. So that's another thing that hopefully Dan and I get to explore going into next year.
Yeah, you know, and we're having Dr. Eileen Schwartz. She's going to do a PD on June 2nd, talking about why inclusionary practices. And it's going to be really, I think it's going to be, I can't wait, because she's just, I could listen to her talk all day long. But so if you have anybody who needs buy-in on why inclusion, that would be a good PD for them to join. And it's only an hour from 2 to 3 on June 2nd. And we can send that link. Can we ever put that link on the UW?
I can put it in the follow-up notes that I send to everybody, so everybody here has access to it. And then if anybody else is interested, just reach out. That's fine.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and Katie, I can send you my other friend, Katie Lawson. So many Katies and Cassies and Kathys. I'm getting so confused. But she does the PE at the EU, and she has a lot. When she came in, she had so many new ideas, and there's so many cool games and things in there. And I can connect you with her, and she can show you some cool, real easy stuff to make that more inclusive.
That would be great.
Christina said she would love to say something about inclusionary preschools from a mom's perspective. Absolutely, Christina.
Yeah.
Okay, there, my computer wouldn't unmute. Many years ago, we did have an inclusionary preschool here, and that educator retired, and then the program changed. And inclusionary wasn't what it was then, what it is now, but my daughter was one of the typically developing, and she's a senior about getting ready to graduate. And I can tell you, some of the friends she made at 3 years old here at Hood Canal School, who were SPED students of some sort, I don't know what it was, she is still super good friends with them. And they hang out together, and they've gone through school, and they've been cheerleaders for each other because that's what they learned to do in preschool. And they were cheerleaders here at Hood Canal, and then they went on to Shelton High School, and we're the little fish in a very big pond when we leave Hood Canal and go to Shelton High School. And they almost never saw each other. So then social media, they became cheerleaders for each other on social media of, I know I don't get to see you, but you can do this. And one of the girls, she's had me in tears posting on social media about how I'm making it. I'm going to graduate. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And look what I'm doing. And my daughter jumps on there and she goes, I always believed in you. And I'll jump on there and say, you were an amazing little kid. Look what you're doing now. And she calls me mom number 2. And it's such a wonderful feeling to see these kids, because there's our school, if they do 2 years of preschool, they're here for 11 years. And we really get to know them from, they look like they should still be in diapers sometimes when they come to our preschool. And then we see them as 8th graders, and they're bigger than half of us adults. And they come back and they're so excited to tell us that I'm graduating, and they'll pop in and give hugs to us staff that they remember. And it's a really fantastic thing that I cannot support enough, because I saw how it benefited my daughter to be empathetic and to be more caring about her friends.
Yeah.
So, yay.
Yeah, so true. Thank you so much, Chris.
Does anyone else have any last statements or questions? just like to commend both you and Katie for working through this hectic time and still finding a way to not only address the remote learning aspect, but still fighting to be more inclusive in one of the most difficult times for educators, and just pushing forward. You guys are a light at the end of the tunnel when you think about it. And it just shows how this is something that's deep in your heart, and you really feel that this work needs to be done. Katie said 99%, you, Kathy, 1% me. Go, Kathy. Kathy is very humble. You do so much amazing work. And Noodles, of course, Noodles. Do such amazing work.
And Val.
And Val. Diligently working in the background. And I also want to commend everyone who came today, because that goes to show where your mindset is. You want to be more inclusive, and you're trying to learn, and whether you're just starting your journey or you're just trying to get an idea, I still commend you for hopping in and wanting to learn more. So if you need more information again on those webinars that we discussed on the UDL, the SCL, also the CTE program, there are deep dives on that and a lot of information, a lot of content on the IPP demo sites page. And if you want more information on Hood Canal, how to get in contact with Katie, how to get in contact with Kathy, they are more than willing to talk to everyone. You can also go on the Hood Canal website and join and look for them there. And thank you.
I know there's a lot of information,
A
and
lot of information, tons.
it's
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate you all.
thank you guys.
Thank you for sharing again, Christina.
Vernon. You there? That's our principal.
You guys did so well. I mean, at this point, I'm not even surprised.
Well,
I just want to point out, I feel like it should be noted that we had our transportation director, our foods director, our superintendent, our counselors, office staff, principal, and at least 80% of our paras in attendance today.